Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So I was talking about the difference between the continuous variables and the discrete variables. So continuous variables are those variables which are going to take each and every value within their range, and the discrete variable like the prices, like your like the prices, like the GDP, like the consumption, like the interest rate, investment, all the macroeconomic variables majorly are the discrete variables. They can take any value within their range, not by taking all the maximum, all the each and every value within their range. And apart from the continuous and the discrete variables, there are two types of other variables, that are dependent and the independent variables. Now the dependent variables are those variables which depend upon something, and the independent variables are those variables which doesn't depend upon anything. It that depends upon some which doesn't depend upon the anything. And how we are going to make use of all these variables in order to make the economist's behavior, and from these we can devise the policies to improve the economic performance. For example, the relationship between the interest rate and the investment. Now in terms of the interest rate and the investment, interest rate is the independent variable and investment is the dependent variable. So the relationship between these two variables is the negative. If the interest rate has been increased, the investment will decrease, and if the interest rate has been decreased, the investment will increase. From this we can devise the policy that if we want to increase the economic situation, we should decrease our interest rate, as the central bank has recently decreased its interest rate by 0.75% from 12.25 to I think 11.5%. Example of a model. Now we are going to cite example of a simple and the concept which you are familiar with are that of the supply and demand. For example, this is a scenario of the Pakistan, and we have to understand a model in which we have to understand what are the different factors which are going to affect the supply and demand of a new car, and shows how the various events affect the price and quantities of car. Now, you have to make the assumption that the market is competitive. It means market is perfectly competitive. You have to take this assumption. And each buyer and seller is too small to affect the market price. As you must be familiar with the structure of the market in terms of the perfect competition, its assumption is that the number of the buyers are so many and the number of the sellers are so many. So each buyer and each seller is the price taker. Price taker means they have to accept the price which is being determined by the market. They cannot alter the price by their own. This is the assumption. As you know that the market for the cars is not perfectly competitive. For the easiness, in order to make them easy for you to understand, we are going to take this assumption that this market is perfectly competitive. Now different variables which we are going to use is the quantity of demand of the car. Okay, quantity of supply of the car, which the Toyota or the Suzuki are going to supply. Prices of the new cars, that represents the equilibrium price. Our income, aggregate income, how the income of the consumers are going to affect the demand of the cars. And the prices of the steel. We are taking the one additional variable, that is the income. For example, in the current scenario, as the income of the people is on a declining, because of the fact all the factories and all the other situations of the country is representing that all the other means of the income have been restricted to some extent. So how can this affect the scenario? And in terms of the supply, one additional variable is being taken that represents the price of the steel. That is an input, that how the prices of the steel changes, then what will be the impact on the supply of the cars, that the steel is being used to make up the body of the car. So demand of the cars, negatively sloped demand curve, where the quantity demand, it depends upon two factors. That this one is your dependent variable and these two are the independent variable. This is the prices of the car and this one is your income. Shows that the quantity of the car consumers demand is related towards the prices of the car, and the aggregate income depends upon our income. So functional notation, how can we write in the form of the functional notation? That quantity demand is a function of these two and a specific function shows the relationship. And so how can we find out this? It is like okay, how can we convert this type of data into a specific notational form? It means we have got the prices, different prices and different incomes and different demands, and we have applied a simple regression analysis, multiple regression analysis in order to establish this equation. That's 60 minus 10p plus 2p. It is the list of the variables. So basically these are the list of the variables that are going to affect the quantity of the demand. So the market for the cars demand, when we have to plot it like that, the demand curve shows the relationship between the quantity demand and the price by keeping all the other things constant. It means we are veiling only these two things. We have the taste of the people, the expectations of the people, the number of sellers in the car, the market, our taxes, and the government rules and regulations are taken as constant. So basically we are dealing with these two types of the variables. When we have to plot it, then this is the negatively sloped demand curve. Okay. Now in case of the supply, what do you mean by the supply? Supply represents the positive relationship in the price and the quantity. And in this case, the supply of the car depends upon two variables. One is on its own price and other on the prices of the steel. Prices of steel is taken as the prices of the input. So the supply curve shows the relationship between the quantity supplied and the price by copying all the other things constant. It means we are making use of the certain assumptions representing that technological factors, government rules and regulations, producers' expectations, economic conditions remains constant within this stage. It means we are making use of assumptions. So whenever we are going to develop a model, we are making use of the certain assumptions. Certain assumptions means all the other irrelevant details are being taken as a constant, so that we can only consider the rate of the change or the relationship between the variables under considerations. So by plotting all the two curves together, when the two curves intersect with each other, this one is the equilibrium price and this one is the equilibrium quantity. Now, whenever our income is going to increase, whenever the income of the person is going to increase, then it depends upon then the response will be in two ways: whether he considered these cars as a normal good or whether he considered these cars as an inferior good. When he considers these cars as a normal good, he will purchase more of it, and when he considers these cars as an inferior good, he purchases less of it. So an increase in income increases the quantity of cars consumers demand at each price. It means that they are considering these cars as a normal good. So the demand of the cars will increase. Then the price of the car will increase, and also the quantity of the car which is being sold in the market will increase as the demand curve has moved out. That represents the comparative static analysis which you have done in the macroeconomics, that how due to the change of the one factor, the determinants of the demand, or due to the change in the determinants of the supply, how the supply and the demand curves are going to move, and what will be the consequent impact on the prices and the quantity of that market. Now, effects of the steel price increase. Now, the initial case for this was the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. And now what happens? Increase in the prices of steel. Whenever the prices of the inputs are increased, the supply of the cars, the supply of that product has been decreased. It has got a negative impact on the supply, representing that the supply curve is going to move backwards. Whenever the supply less, by keeping all the other things constant, the price of the cars has increased because of the increase in the price of the steel, which is being used as an input in the production of the cars, and the quantity of the cars which are being sold in the market should be decreased. So the increase in the market price and reduces the quantity. So these are the models, how we can use these models in order to make up the policies, and how they can help us to find out the solution of a crisis which is going to happen in the market, all due to the fact that we build up the relationships among the variables, which we investigate them with the help of the data and with the help of the proper econometric analysis. And after the results show us that what should be done in order to reduce this disaster or this problem, how this problem could be resolved by using the alternative manners. So there are different two other types of the variables too. Then the endogenous and the exogenous variables. The values of the endogenous variables are those variables which are determined within the market, which we can establish. And the values of the exogenous variables are determined outside the market, outside the model. The model takes their values and behavior as given. For example, with which we are going to take as the constant. In this model, supply and demand for the cars The endogenous variables were only three variables: demand of the cars, supply of the cars, and the price, while the exogenous was the price of the steels and your income. Because their behavior was taken as constant, they were not determined. They were used within the model, but the values were not determined within the model. The values of only prices and the price and the quantity of cars and the quantity of cars in terms of demand and supply were only discussed, not the income and the prices of steel was discussed. So the endogenous and the exogenous variables that are determined within the model, they are endogenous, and those who are determined outside of the model, they are termed as the exogenous variables. Now you should try the supply and demand. Write down the demand and supply equations for the mobile phones, including two exogenous variables in each equation. Draw a demand and supply graph for the mobile phones. Use your graph to show a change in one of your exogenous variables affects the model endogenous variable. You can increase it or you can decrease it. And you then see what will be the impact on the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. This is, you can do it by your own self. The use of the multiple models. No one model can address all the issues we care about. For example, the model which we have discussed earlier, it was representing the relationship between the price and the quantity. Taxation was not involved over there. The economic situation was not involved over there. So a model is only a simpler part. It only represents the relationship between the variables under consideration. All the other variables and is linked towards all the other variables, it is not going to establish the link over there. So not a single model can address all the issues we care about. For example, supply-demand model of the US car market can tell us about how a fall in aggregate US income affects prices and quantities of cars, but it cannot tell us why the aggregate income falls, because of the fact that how our income is going to fall and why it has been decreased. It is only going to show us the fact that if the income of the consumer is going to decrease, then what will be the impact on the car market. Use of the multimodal models also show that if we learn different models for studying different issues, for example, unemployment, inflation, long-run growth. Now, in terms of the unemployment inflation, the relationship between, as established by the Phillips, the relationship is only between the unemployment and the inflation, and the assumption over there is that it happens only in the short run. But it is relevant towards only two variables. It is not concerned with the long-run economic growth. For each new model, we should keep the track. For each and every model, we have to make their assumptions. And we have to also establish that which variable endogenous, which are exogenous, and the questions it can help us to understand, those it cannot. How we can understand the what are the different options which it can explain to us, to you, which it can explain us, and what are the different questions which is not going to give the answer of those. Now, in terms of the prices, there are two concepts. One is the flexible price and the other one is the sticky price. Flexible prices are always those prices which is going to change, and that represents the market clearing. Market clearing, that if due to anything there is the surplus of a commodity in the market or the shortage of a commodity in the market is going to clear because of the prices are the flexible. In the short run, many prices are sticky. Short run means that whenever your productivity is not going to change. In that time periods, the prices are sticky. It is just sluggishly, very slowly in response to the changes in supply and demand. For example, many labor contracts fix the nominal wage for a year or longer. For example, if you apply for a job, you have to sign a contract in which it is written that your wages will be increased after the time period of 1 year. It means our wages are sticky. They adjust sluggishly in response to the changes in the macroeconomic conditions, and many magazine publishers changes the prices only once after every 3 to 4 years. So in the short run, the prices are mostly sticky, and the economist's behavior depends partly on whether the prices are sticky or the flexible. If the prices are sticky, it is in the short run, demand may not equal to the supply. It means there may be the result of the shortage or of the surplus. It may result into the unemployment, and why firms cannot always sell all the goods they produce because of the fact that the market is not cleared because of the presence of certain surpluses or the shortages in it. If the prices are flexible, in the long run, the market is going to clear and the economy behaves very differently. So in this chapter, we have discussed some basic concepts, that how do we build up the models, what are the basic assumptions which are going to take up in order to make clear a model and how a model can help us in order to answer different macroeconomic policy, which we are going to discuss one by one within the next chapters.